Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of the Music History Project. Cheers
proud.
From the gallery. Thank you.
Proud Papa.
That was great.
Today we're going to be talking about, you guessed it, Elvis. Stay tuned and you're going to hear more. All of the content you hear on this podcast, as well as all of our other episodes, comes from the NAMM Oral History Program and our collection of over 3,000 video interviews. If you want to check out any of that, make sure you visit our website, which is www.namm.org/library.
So January 8th marks the 83rd anniversary of his birth, and we thought it might be fun, clever, and entertaining to pull together some audio clips from the NAMM Oral History Program of those that worked with him, knew him, and have an insight about his impact on American popular music.
So should we go down the list and say everybody's name we're going to be hearing from? Do we want to alternate? That would be really exciting. Like I say one name, Mike can say a name.
Yeah,
Dan
I like that. I like
name.
saying a name here and there.
As long as I don't get stuck with a hard one. That's all that matters.
Who wants to start?
I'll start. The first person we're going to hear from in just a few minutes is Elvis's last drummer, Ron Tutt.
And we're also going to hear from Mike Ladd.
And we're also going to hear from, and I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, Herb Brochstein.
There you
See,
go.
I didn't
I
want
got
that
it.
one, so
I
that's
got
why I
it.
jumped in there real quick.
I always get the hard one.
And then a couple of cats that worked with Elvis at the very beginning, Scotty Moore and DJ Fontana.
And then we're also going to hear from James Burton.
And a couple of guys who worked with Elvis in the Nashville scene, Chip Young and Fred Foster.
And we can't forget about Boots Randolph.
Oh, man, my hero.
Or one of our all-time best friends, Norbert Putnam.
Who has been a huge help to us in the oral history program. So it'll be a delight to talk a little bit about him. And yes, I just said the word delight.
Is that today's word of the day?
It might be. Frank DeVito, who also worked on drums with Elvis in the studios in Los Angeles, along with the recording engineer Mike Moran.
And just double-checking our list here. That looks like all of them. Because we got James Burton, right?
Yep.
Okay. Then that's all of the stellar cast that we're going to be hearing from today.
It's quite the lineup.
It really is. It's really exciting to have a collection that has this depth of insight. So let's get started.
Oh boy, so we broke down this podcast. It's going to be 2 parts. So we're going to do part 1. That'll be airing. That's what you're listening to now. And then in 2 weeks, you're going to be hearing the follow-up. So that way you get a whole month of Elvis. And I vote, I don't know about Mike, I bet he's on board with this, that if we can stump Dan on trivia questions about Elvis, I don't know, we get like lunch or something.
We got to get something because that's close to impossible. I don't think we can do that.
I'm up for the challenge.
Yeah. The first segment we're going to talk about in our podcast is all about instruments and mostly kind of focusing on the instruments that were sold to Elvis, what he played, because I think a lot of people just assume guitar because that's what you see him photographed in and that's what you see him playing in videos and stuff like that. But there's a lot more to it. And
another aspect that we're going to be covering as far as the instruments go is the gear that his musicians were playing. In fact, that's might be a good place to start. We'll hear from Ron Tutt now, who was born in Dallas, Texas in 1938 and has played drums with people like Neil Diamond, the Carpenters. He even had a stint with Jerry Garcia for a bit. But it's probably best known for playing behind Elvis during the tours of the early 1970s all the way through Elvis's passing in 1977. And this is a great little clip. It's actually also part of his own web clip on the NAMM website. When Ron's talking about this incident he had with Elvis about his new Ludwig drum kit.
I had been working with Ludwig, and they were developing a new type of drum shell called Vistalite. And what it was a clear sort of a plastic or polymer, or I don't know what you technically call it, but it came in several different colors, as well as clear. And one of the things that they were going to try to promote was this rainbow set. And it, it's hard to describe it, but as you go through the spectrum of the rainbow, it'd go to amber, to yellow, to orange, to red, to green, to blue, and then the bass drums are another color. It's a beautiful looking set, just absolutely gorgeous. With 8 toms and 2 bass drums, and so you can imagine all the color that it had, and yet it looked like Wonder Woman's airplane. It was, you could see through the whole thing, which has taken a big resurgence, particularly in Europe these days. Those Vistalite sets are really considered pretty collectible. And however, they did have a downside, so that's the point of my story. I got them in, I tuned them up best as I could. Opening night in Vegas, I play them, and I'd look. There again, we're constant contact on stage, and he's constantly giving me this strange look. And I'm like, what am I doing? What's going on? Something's not right. And at the end of the first show, I tap on my dressing room door. Elvis wants to see you. I thought, okay, well, we're going to get to the bottom of this and find out what's going on. I walk in there. He's pacing back and forth in his dressing room. And he didn't even want to look at me. He just pacing back and forth. Finally he stops, and he breathes, and he says, Ronnie, he says, do you like those new drums? And I said, well, Elvis, I think they're beautiful. I think they just look fantastic, but I think they sound terrible. He said, thank God, get rid of them. So he was so relieved that because he didn't like them either, but he didn't want to tell me he didn't like my drums. He wanted me to hear it from me first. So that says a lot about his personality, and the respect that we all had. And sure enough, the next day I had my other drums. He said, well, where's your other set? And I said, well, it went back to L.A. Can you get it here for tomorrow night? Oh, yeah. So back to the good old maple shells. He likes the warmth of those.
So as someone who's not a drummer or in percussion or a music maker or anything cool like you two guys, Mike, maybe you can answer this for me. What was the construction of the drum shells before they were playing around with this translucent idea?
Well, the typical way to make drums is out of wood, as many people do still today. All different kinds of wood. It all has different tonal qualities, depending on whether you use birch or babinga or maple or any kind of wood. And Ludwig started using acrylics to make these translucent drums, and they definitely had a different sound. A name that comes to mind, John Bonham, later years, really made the Ludwig translucent drums famous. He has a couple famous kits that are like that, and they did have their own sound, and I can understand someone not liking it as much as, the original wood-sounding drum.
So it's definitely more of a personal preference kind of thing?
Yeah. I don't really know how to describe the sound, but personally, I like it for some things. But, you could make the argument that different kinds of wood sound different, which they do. So it's just another material of making drums.
Well said.
Well, now that I have a full understanding of drums, quiz me. I'm sure I'll get it right. We're going to hear from Mike Ladd next in his web clip, which you can see the video of this same interview on our website, so make sure you check it out if you're interested. And he talks about his guitar shop and his custom guitar shop. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, is this the one that's still or was across from Graceland, or is still across from Graceland?
Well, it's not there anymore. It was there during the 70s, and Mike had a shop downtown Memphis, and then moved it over to across the street from Graceland, where he was buying, selling, and also making guitars. And as a luthier, he was approached by Elvis to build a guitar, which is the segment of the interview we're going to hear next. What isn't covered in this that I think is really interesting is just all the shenanigans that Mike got to see from his binoculars across the street in his shop, watching Elvis on his snowmobile and things like that on the grounds at Graceland. That shop and all of the other little knick-knack shops that were across the street are all gone now, and it now is a very large auditorium complex that has a lot of souvenir shops. There's a movie theater. His 2 airplanes are there for view, along with a automobile museum, and then all of his costumes and records and awards are also all available for people to see. So it's quite a complex there now. But let's go back in time and talk a little bit with Mike Ladd.
The first one was Memphis Music Center, then Mike Ladd's Guitar City. Okay. And then the last one was Mike Ladd's Custom Guitars. It was across the street from Elvis's house on Graceland. That was the last store. But the one, what I wanted to do when we had the first one on Highland is I wanted to say, instead of having in those days you walked into a music store, there was a piano sitting there. And the guitars were hanging back on the walls or something, whatever that he had, 2 or 3 models that you had to order. There was a music store in Memphis that had nothing but a counter and a book, a catalog. And whatever you had to order, look out of that book and order what it was and get paying for it, and you come back 2 weeks and pick it up, And a fire truck ran through that thing, and I'm glad that happened because I was glad that place was gone.
Wait, the fire truck really ran through it?
Oh, yeah, ran right inside, stick it out the side. I used to have a picture of it. It was in Whitehaven, right down there off of Bellevue. And but summer was, that's when I really got to do my thing. I started doing the custom work and everything on the Highland. But I got to really get turned loose on summer. We built a stage, had a stage on there, had the amps and everything set up just like so. When they get up on the stage, they could walk up on stage, pick the guitar up that they wanted, turn the amp on it, be just like they were on stage anywhere. Just so I get the feel and do everything like that they wanted to do, play. Wow. And it was people, and other people. There'll be people in Memphis say, "Oh, you gave it," but they came in my store and took pictures of it before they put their store together. That's how that all that stuff. And the custom work was just. It was so unique because nobody, you look out there now, it's hard to understand that at some time there was nothing like that, and people would get angry with you if you want to change anything. How dare you change, well, what's the matter with it, But that's how that got going. And we had a tremendous clientele. If I had any business acumen, which I don't, I'm a guitar player, sort of thing like that, I would have realized what I could have done with it, to carry it further. But I just didn't have the acumen. I didn't have the really business knowledge. I inherited. I got the music part of the family, and everybody else got the business sense, But if I'd put some stuff together and thought about it, we could have really taken that thing to all kinds of heights. But the last store on Elvis Presley Boulevard was when Vernon came to me. He said, "Elvis has got a birthday coming up. I want you to design a guitar for him, something special." I said, "Yes, sir." So I did a Memphis rock and roll to me is black and white and gold, and so I did the Elvis instrument with that set up, and I did 7 coats of hand rubbed black lacquer.
7.
In the original. This is a prototype of a remake. This one is right here, and ordinarily it would have a karate symbol on the back of it. Now, when I did the one for Elvis, it had 7 coats of hand-rubbed black lacquer. And you could look in that thing, and you could look like it's that deep, And I just got through doing it, and I got a guy sent a thing over to me, and it was a Taekwondo sticker. And he wanted to put on the guitar, and I almost was in tears. I didn't want to do it. And so I said, "I really don't want to do that. Do I have to do it?" And in about another day or so, I was sitting there at the store, and the phone rang. And I picked it up and said, "You Mike Ladd?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Hang on a second." And the phone was passed, and I heard a voice saying, "Put the damn sticker on, man." Click. And that was my conversation with the king. That was my conversation with the king. That's how that was.
He said, "Put the damn sticker."
Put the damn sticker on, boy, or man, or something. Click, just bang, So that's how.
So you put the damn sticker on.
I sure did, but I got him back. I made him pay for the guitar. He wasn't expecting that. So I think I charged him all of $1,800 for it, which these days you couldn't even get the Mother of Pearl Nick done for that,
So keeping on track with the topic of instruments, next we're going to hear from Herb Brochstein. Brochstein? Brochstein. I never know if it's
You
Steen
second
or
guessed
Stein.
yourself.
Yeah.
I saw
you
that,
said it right the first time.
I was there. So Herb opened up a drum shop in Houston, if I am correct, in 1955. And he sold Elvis his first drum kit. Is that right, Dan?
That's right.
And I believe the story goes that Elvis and DJ Fontana were on their way to their first gig together as a foursome and needed a drum kit. And Herb sold them this drum set. And from there, I think all that I know is that it showed back up on the market. No one really knows what happened to it. Maybe you can fill in the gaps, Dan?
Well, I think part of the story is going to be told here in the clip from Herb's interview, which was fascinating to me. But essentially, Herb had no idea who this guy was with the pink shirt and the DA. So several months later, he was looking in Life magazine and saw his drum kit and this big article about Elvis. So what's also cool is Herb became a really dear friend to all of us here in the music industry after forming a very popular and well-known drumstick manufacturer in Texas called ProMark. His son was also involved with the industry as well, and it was a real pleasure to document his entire story. And from that, we're just lifting up this one out of many other stories, the one about Elvis.
And I think my favorite part is when I'm screening all these interviews and gathering our notes to find what clips we're going to play for you guys and everything like that. I get to see the full content. And I distinctly remember it just caused this wave of a memory in me where you get to tour the factory, right? And right. I just remember hearing on the audio Herb giving you all these drumsticks. Like, here, take these drumsticks. Here, take these drumsticks. And I assumed at that point he was retired, and I just would have loved to see the look on the line workers' faces. Just be like, why is this guy grabbing all our drumsticks and giving them away? But it kind of, to me, it set the tone of you can see what kind of guy he was. They're just so passionate about what he does and caring and just excited to talk about it. So
absolutely. He was a charm. One of the things that I think was really kind of fun is after touring the factory on our way back to the house is when he actually told me the Elvis story. I hadn't known about that before. So I set up all the gear again. I'm like, oh, we are definitely getting this on tape. So I'm glad we have it.
You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. The Elvis story. This is probably about 1954 or 55, I'm not sure. A friend of mine, a drummer, worked at another music store. We were talking one day. He says, did you ever hear about this guy that's singing around Pasadena, which is right outside of Houston, Pasadena, Texas? This guy's a singer and a guitar player. His name is Elvis Presley. Well, I wouldn't have remembered the name, but I said, well, guitar, singer, hillbilly. I'm not too interested. I'm a big jazz band drummer. So he said, yeah. He says, this guy's really knocking the people dead. He drives around in a pink Cadillac. Okay. This is before he hit it big, you know. Not too long before he hit it big, but before he hit it big. And a couple of months went by, I guess, and I'm looking out the front of my little drum shop, and I see a pink Cadillac drive up. And I thought to myself, I wonder if this is that guy that Red was telling me about, that's the singer and the guitar player. The, quote, hillbilly, quote. Anyway, three guys come in. The three guys turned out to be Elvis, DJ Fontana, the drummer, and Bill Black, the bass player.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember if the guitar player was with him then, but it doesn't matter. I know those three for sure. Anyway, they came in. Elvis has got khaki pants, khaki shirt, a lot of Brill cream in his hair, nice tan, good-looking guy. And they wanted to see a set of drums for his drummer. And I had 6 or 7 sets in stock, which was a lot in those days, not like today by a long shot. And they looked, white pearl, black pearl, green sparkle, gold sparkle, and they didn't seem to like any of them. He says, "What are those drums over there in the corner?" I said, "That's my personal set." I said, I've got a thing at KPRC TV today at 4 o'clock, and I'm all set, ready to go. He said, "Can I see your drums?" I said, "Well, yeah."
This is Elvis or DJ?
Elvis. "Can I see your drums?" "Okay." So I take the bass drum out of the case cover, and his eyes got big. The front bass drum head had an unbarn calfskin, unshaven, brown and white, with the fur, the hair still on it.
Mm.
And he didn't ask for anything else. He says, "Can I buy your set?" I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "I've sold my set 25 or 30 times. I said, "I just get a new color or some new heart, and I play different brands depending on, what's the latest." Anyway, I remember he peeled off 5 big ones, $500 bills, and he took those 4 drums, and I figured, well, the drummer is going to be repaying him about $25 a week until those drums are paid for. Because I'd done it many, many times for others,
Right.
So, I guess 3 or 4 months went by, maybe even 5 or 6. I don't really remember how long, but I opened a Life magazine one day, centerfold, and there's my set of drums on the Ed Sullivan stage.
Okay.
And there's that guy, that Elvis guy. And the audience is going crazy.
That's your set?
Yeah, that was my set.
It was blue?
No. They were copper colored. They were Gretsch drums, solid copper in color. Instead of it having a pearl design, it was just solid. It was plastic, all right, but the covering was just that one color, copper. And anyway, that was the set. And I know DJ was with him for about 14 years.
He sure was, yeah.
So,
did he ever have another set?
Actually, I'm not sure about that because the floor tom was stolen or lost. And so he only had 3 of the 4 drums that he had purchased. And
that's interesting because we have a picture of Elvis from either the Steve Allen show or the Milton Berle show, and it has him right in front of the drum, and you can see that it's not shaved, that you can see his spots.
Yeah.
That's your drums?
yeah.
That's cool. That's way funny.
Yeah. And anyway, I never, my initial impression, just when this buddy of mine was telling me about the guitar player, I just imagined him as being a country western hillbilly guitar player, singer. Nothing wrong with that. That was just what I envisioned.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was going to be the king of rock and roll. So anyway, that's the story of Elvis, other than DJ called me about, it's been close to 2 years ago now. Called me one day and he said, "Hey, I'm thinking to auction my set. The original set. I'm having a drum made, the floor tom, to match it. So I'll have the 4 drums." And so I've been offered $90,000 for them, but he said, "I think I might be able to get as much as $150 on eBay." Anyway, he said, "I need a letter of authenticity from you." said, oh, absolutely no problem. I said, I've got a replica set that I sold to Elvis for you, pictured in the catalog, and your name is mentioned in print, and I'll be happy to write the letter, to back it up, because there's a rock and roll book out by Max Weinberg, the drummer with the E Street Band.
Oh, yeah.
And in the interview, they're asking DJ, he said, I noticed your snare drum didn't sound like a country and western drum. It sounded more like a jazz drum. And he said, yeah, he says, that's true. He says, because I bought that set from Herb Brochstein in Houston.
Oh, no, they got your name wrong.
In print.
Oh.
And anyway, I thought that was kind of cute, frankly.
Yeah.
And I sent him the catalog that had I was pictured in the catalog with this replica set that I had made and sold to Elvis. And that was just what he was looking for, and I sent a letter to authenticate, that was the set that I sold and so forth. And I talked to him a few months after that, to DJ, and he hadn't sold them at that time. He was holding out for 150, but he had turned down 90 grand.
Wow. That's something. Yeah, because I talked to him at an Asheville show about 2 years ago, and he was saying the same thing. He was about to auction it off, but he didn't give me a price that he was looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But, you got to figure those drums have got to be worth that.
Yeah, to the right kind of collector.
Right. Somebody's got the money. Would you pay $90,000 to get it back?
No. I wouldn't pay $9,000 to get them back. What am I going to do with them? I'm not in that business.
Right.
To show them off and, some of these restaurants that are from that time period, they might be interested in an original set. It was in the Jailhouse Rock.
Oh, it was?
Movie, yeah.
Okay, so now we're obviously painting a picture of Elvis's musical abilities outside of just strumming the acoustic guitar. And what's neat is these little vignettes of Elvis sitting down and playing the drums. We're going to hear a couple of other opportunities throughout this podcast of people recalling Elvis playing the piano and some other instruments. So while he may not have been well-versed in all of them, he certainly had some more musical abilities than most of us really knew. And that's kind of fun to hear these sort of behind-the-scenes stories. Similar to that, the story that Scotty Moore tells us was that Elvis had a propensity of borrowing other people's guitars, including Scotty's, for which Scotty wasn't always thrilled. And so after hearing Scotty tell the story of Elvis borrowing his guitar for his famous 1968 NBC comeback special, every time I see that, I look for Scotty's frown on his face as Elvis strums rapidly his precious guitar. So these behind-the-scenes stories kind of add to the charm that these were regular guys and enjoying what they do. So let's hear from Scotty. Scotty was Elvis's first guitarist. He was also Elvis's first manager.
And a slight plug to our earlier episodes of this podcast. If you missed it, Scotty was in an earlier episode where we talked all about Sun Records. It was our first 2 episodes, so if you haven't heard them, definitely go check them out.
Was there any other instruments? There's some pictures taken of Elvis behind the drums, and I know, of course, we know he played the piano. Was there any other instruments? That,
he can get a little noise out of just about anything that he tried. Piano, organ, or anything. He just loved all that stuff. Oh, he couldn't play drums, but he could keep time with them some way or another. He just if you remember TV special, 1968, what's now referred to as the comeback special, which we'd never gone anywhere. I don't know why they say comeback, but where he takes my guitar and plays the rest of the thing electric. And so he loved those bass runs, just the rhythm and putting those bass runs on that. And
I heard you weren't too happy about him using your guitar.
oh, he'd break string. He didn't know, thank God, he didn't tell you, but he'd scratch him up, and I was just sitting there going, oh.
He may be the king, but he still scratches my guitar.
Yeah, right.
Before we move on, though, I want to talk about how I was telling Dan during the break that I love Scotty Moore. I never got to meet him, but it's like he's like grandpa cute, like your heart melts when you hear him talk, and you get the warm fuzzies. And
yeah, and even when he's upset about something, it's still like a cute old man.
He's talking about Elvis breaking his guitar strings, and I could just see him being like, "Oh, that little rascal!" I mean.
That's so true. And he was such a real guy. I mean, golly shucks kind of person, and I mean that in a very loving way. And the one thing that I really sort of really got out of talking to him was the fact that in those early days when he was starting out with Elvis and Bill Black at Sun Records, as Scotty told me, they were not professionals. They were very, very much amateurs. They didn't really know what they were doing. And I think that's part of the charm, even though we don't really come out and say it. But, that rawness and that uneducated really way of communicating through music is really what made that whole genre of rockabilly stick in our minds, in my opinion. So it's really neat to hear some of those early ideas and thoughts and how that started developed.
So moving forward, we just covered all about the instruments that Elvis played and acquired, and now we're going to start talking about the early years of Elvis and personal experiences of meeting Elvis for the first time. And we're going to start off with James Burton.
The great James Burton on Telecaster. What a marvelous guy he is, still performing all around the world. James actually started off as a teenager playing behind Ricky Nelson on Ricky's early career. Many of Ricky's biggest hits in the 1950s, Hello, Mary Lou, and I'm a Traveling Man, and things like that. And then started working with Elvis in the late 60s and performed live with Elvis as well as recording with him until 1977. And then since that time, James has been very active all around the world, playing with people like John Denver and Neil Diamond and others. And he's a marvelous guy, and I think you're going to come to like him too just by hearing his voice. So let's hear a little bit from James Burton.
Do you have any idea if Elvis sort of toned, I mean, I've heard the recordings of it, but just in your opinion, did Elvis sort of tone to be more country when he was at the Louisiana Hayride, do you think?
Well, he's always had country roots and gospel country and a lot of blues, and I think the mixture of all those together turned him into a pretty good rock artist, And of course, he could do pretty much any style as a singer. He's a great singer, and he had some really. I just think his basic style was probably more country, gospel.
Good point. Yeah.
Yeah, he was quite a showman, and he played rhythm guitar. He started out with a small group. Scotty Moore on guitar, and he had Bill Black on bass and stand-up bass. And it was like a trio at first, Elvis and the two guys, And then later on, the drummer, DJ Fontana, who is from Shreveport, and he was playing drums on the Hayride one night, so Elvis asked him if he would play on a couple of songs with him on the show, and he did, and he hired him.
So we just got done hearing from James Burton, who mentioned the Louisiana Hayride, and if you're not familiar, that is a television program, radio program. That is a radio program.
Before our time.
Wait, there was a time before television?
What's radio?
I don't understand.
You guys are embarrassing yourselves.
Netflix? I don't know.
The Louisiana Hayride was very similar to the country version in Nashville called the Grand Ole Opry. And this was a live broadcast that brought you the music and comedy along with other entertainment of the day in Louisiana. And this was so famous that it actually did translate into television in the later years, in the late 1950s. And as I recall, Imogene Coca and some other comic geniuses were a part of that program in the early days. This was a big boost for Elvis's career when he was just cutting records on Sun with Billy Black on bass and Scotty Moore on guitar. The three of them would travel around to fairs and concerts in the South, but not getting a whole lot of exposure other than their record on radio play until this live concert at the Louisiana Hayride, which led to a couple of different segments. They were invited back a couple of different dates. And this was a big boost. In fact, it was really a delight to me as a young Elvis fan in the early 80s when they finally released some of those live concerts, because I had heard about songs that they had been recording but never heard them. Like they did a great version of Chuck Berry's Maybelline only on that concert and never in a recording studio or elsewhere. So it was kind of fun to have an insight as to Elvis and the guys performing popular songs of the day for this radio show. And of course, the big thing that came from that was the fact that there was a young drummer who was on staff for the Louisiana Hayride playing behind everybody else that Elvis took a liking to and brought him on the road with him, and that's DJ Fontana.
Do you know, Dan, if any of that content from the Louisiana Hayride is online? Like, if you search for it, could you find a video or audio of it?
I haven't actually looked, but I'm guessing there's got to be at least audio tracks.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's somewhere.
Yeah. Internet, endless.
It has everything.
Yeah, everything. So let's hear from DJ, who Dan mentioned was a drummer with the Louisiana Hayride at first, but then he joins Elvis later on and goes on tour with Elvis. So he's a pretty cool guy.
So the story goes that Elvis has an appearance on the Louisiana Hayride. Is that where they first met him?
That's where they first come in. It was Elvis, Scotty, and Bill. And they didn't have a drummer. And I happened to be there just by chance that Saturday night. And Scotty and they said, well, why don't you come up and help us out a little bit? I said, okay. I said, let's go back in the dressing room and talk about it. Let me see what you guys are going to do, So we went in. Scotty brought his guitar. Elvis brought his little rhythm. And Bill. So we didn't have a lot of pieces, so it wasn't hard to get around. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? They said, well, I'll just kind of play a little rhythm. Oh, okay. So that's what I did. And I got to listen to the guys. And the sound that they were getting was so good. I said, well, why should I assemble it up and bang it up? And I said, I shouldn't do that. Stay out of their way. Let them, they were the stars. Let them do what they're going to do and not clutter up the rhythm. Just play it straight ahead and no tricks, no tom-toms, no cymbals. And I guess they liked it, And so they come down a couple of weeks and I played. And Elvis come over and he said, we're going to go out to Texas for 3 or 4 days. I say out to Texas, within 100 miles of Shreveport, East Texas. And he said, you want to go? I said, yeah. So we went out and we played those 4 days, went back to the Hayride in Shreveport. And he said, well, we're going to go home now. He said, we don't have nothing, zero. And we may never get another job. He said, we're going to go home and see what we can come up with, with agents and bookers. He said, now, if we go out again, would you go with us? I said, well, I'm not doing anything else except the Hayride, one night a week. So that's how basically, it was just by accident I was there. And so in about 10 days, they come back and they said, hey, man, we've got about 15 or 20 shows. His records are getting played. He's getting hotter and hotter right there in Texas, Louisiana, all territorial stuff. It wasn't very big, but just enough to get us work, you know.
Out of curiosity, had you heard of Elvis before he was on TV?
Never heard of him in my life. Nope. He come in, and I had heard the record on the station because they were going to bring him in. And then one of the managers, the bookers, they called me in one day and said, listen to this record. So it was an old Sun record. They said, what do you think? I said, God, how many you got, 8 or 10 pieces on that record? They said, no, 3. And I said, that's going good record. I said, well, we're going to bring the kid in, you know. And I said, that's great. Bring him in. We'll see what we can do. You know, that's all you could do, just listen to him.
So tell me about the guys, because I'm real curious. What kind of guy was Bill?
Bill was a comedian. He was the funny man. There was a lot of early shows that we were doing. The Elvis was actually bombing out there. And people didn't quite understand what he was doing. Moving around, falling down, all that stuff. They weren't used to that. They were used to country acts, playing the guitar, not moving a step, you know. And they saw this kid moving around out there. They said, this guy's crazy, you know. So he'd actually kind of bomb out at first. And Bill would jump up and down, fall on the floor, slap his face, tell funny jokes. And they say, hey, these guys are not bad. They're good people. They're funny. So we like them. So Bill kind of broke the ice for us, a lot of shows. Scotty was, we used to call him the old man. He was quiet, didn't say nothing. He didn't say nothing for 24 years. So I was pretty well in the middle of all of them. You know, I'd stay out of their way, let them fight. They started the show. They were the beginning of that era, and I was just an outsider, actually. You know, they hired me to do that, so I wasn't about to get in the middle of that stuff. Besides that, Elvis was tough anyhow, so I didn't want to fight with him, and so I just stayed out of their way.
What was your first impression of him?
Well, you know, he'd come in, you know, with his clothes first, you know, the peg pants and pink shirts, and I said, well, and the hair, you know, the sideburn. I said, the boy's got something, you know. It's something you couldn't put your finger on. You don't know what the heck he's doing because it was new. You know, the cowboys had their cowboy suits, and, you know, you're used to seeing that. But when this kid coming in with his shoes, two-tone shoes, all kind of colored shirts, and if you or I would have wore those combinations, we'd look like freaks, you know, out there. But everything he put on, he looked good in it, really good. I don't know how, but he did. Because he was a handsome little guy anyhow, you know. Oh, yeah. He never changed. People say he changed, but he never changed. I guess the reason for that was we actually started with him. So he couldn't con us, you know. We was beyond that. We knew his little, his little things, and sometimes he'd get in a bad mood, and we knew that. So as soon as he get in the mood, just leave him alone. Leave him alone for a couple of days. Don't even speak to him. Then you come around and say, hey, what's wrong, guys? You guys mad at me? You know, no. And it was over. You know, he was over his madness, whatever. It wasn't mad at us, maybe. Somebody at home might have made him mad. The colonel might have made him mad. Who knows, you know.
All right, so that was DJ Fontana. And next we're going to hear back from James Burton, who you just heard a moment ago. And he's going to be talking about his first experience meeting Elvis.
Do you remember the very first time you met him?
I sure do. Actually, I didn't meet him until 1969. He called me for the 68 comeback special, but unfortunately I couldn't do it. I was doing an album with Frank Sinatra at that time, and Jimmy Boyden was a producer, and we were booked all week, so I couldn't get out of it. So anyway, I recommended a couple friends of mine to go play. And anyway, Elvis called me in 1969 and to put a band together, asked me if I'd be interested in playing Las Vegas with him, putting a band together, and which I did, you know. But I was real busy in the studio work, and I was trying to figure out boy, I don't know how this is going to work out, because I had a lot of clients, I was very busy in the studios recording. So anyway, I had to work it out somehow which I did, to go do it, And it was wonderful to go out and play live with him and, put the musicians together. But it seemed like when I walked in the studio and he was there, and I went over and he said, "You're James," because he watched me on the Oz and Harriet show to watch me play guitar, and Ricky. Him and Ricky were friends back then. They used to play football together. But I never met Elvis personally until that particular night when I went down for the first rehearsal for the band. He wanted to hear the band, so we got together and played, and it was just incredible. It was like we'd known each other our whole lives, and our musical background is pretty much the same. It was amazing.
So next up, we have a clip from the interview with Chip Young and Fred Foster. Fred was actually just inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, which we actually just visited in the Summer NAMM show, or at the Summer NAMM show, I should say.
And it's really neat. Fred is a genius, really, when it comes to finding talent in Nashville. And I love the story that he heard Elvis early on and knew something was there, but couldn't convince his bosses at Mercury Records at the time to sign Elvis. It's a great story. And sitting next to him, as Mike just mentioned, is Chip Young, who we'll also hear from in this clip. Chip was a studio guitarist. He was born in 1938, and unfortunately we lost him in 2014. A really great guy, very charming, who really was felt overwhelmed and blessed to have had a career in the music industry, playing with such giants as Elvis and many, many others in Nashville. He had a real sense of pride being a part of that scene.
I was in Richmond, Virginia, and I had just left WRVA, which 50,000 watt, sophisticated pop was all they played. Castellani's and Montaboni and Ray Anthony and, And I was headed out to this pop station on the edge of town. And I had the radio on, because I always listened to the stations that I was going to, and I would listen as I left them, too, to see what they were doing.
Smart.
All of a sudden, he said, "Well, here it is, the hottest record in town." And I've heard this sound, I thought, what is that? I pulled over to the side of the road and stopped and turned it up. You're right, I'm left, she's gone. Elvis Presley. I said, holy smoke. This is it. So I get out to the station. I said, "What is that record you're playing?" He said, "It's Elvis Presley." I said, "How hot is it?" He said, "I can't even describe it." He said, "Watch it. I'll play it again." I was looking at the phone. He had about 10 or 12 lines coming in, He put it on, and every line lit up instantly. I went, wow. So I called Art Talmadge, marketing director at Mercury. And I had talked to this DJ who was pretty knowledgeable. And he said, "I understand his contract's for sale." So I called Art and I said, "You have got to buy this artist. He's going to be the biggest thing that's ever happened." And he said, "Oh, come on. What kind of a name is that anyway?" I said, "It's, who cares? I'm telling you what I'm telling you. And you better listen, because this guy is unreal." He said, "Okay, send me a record." Well, where am I going to get one? There was none available at any record shop. I called while I was at the station. And finally, I talked the guy into taping me a copy, and I sent the copy to him overnight. And he called me the next day, and he said, "I think this is the weirdest stuff I've ever heard in my life." I said, "Art, look, you hired me to find you hit records and find you hits we could cover and find ones we could buy. This guy is the whole deal. And so he called Sam Phillips. And he got into the bidding. And he called me one day, 3 or 4 days later, and he said, well, that guy is just totally unreasonable. Said, he wants $50,000 for him. And I've offered him 35, and that's it. I said, Art, you can give him $500,000. It won't matter. You'll make it back on the first record. He said, you're insane. I said, possibly. Never had to debate that, but you could be right. But I know what I'm telling you. Buy him, whatever. He said, no, I'm at 35. The RCA got him. Then Mercury had a meeting of all the field force, by which they'd expanded by now, and we had a bunch of us. We go to Chicago for the meeting, and I walk into the meeting. Heartbreak Hotel is sitting at number 1.
Oh, golly.
And he points at me and he said, if you mention the name, you're fired. Okay. I won't mention the name.
Wow. Incredible.
He finally told me, he said, I should have listened to you. I said, yeah, but you didn't.
Well, that would have changed everything.
Oh, what would that have done for Mercury? Unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. That's almost as much as they paid for the whole contract, wasn't it? Paid $40 for the contract.
Can you imagine?
Unbelievable.
I was right. He would have made it back on the first record.
Yeah.
That's
oh,
right.
gosh, yeah.
The first. Not even talking about the second.
Yeah.
Or the third. That's unbelievable.
All right, so that was Chip Young and Fred Foster. And now we're going to round out this segment about early Elvis and different guys meeting Elvis for the first time with my personal favorite, Scotty Moore, of course. And so we're going to actually hear 2 back-to-back clips of coming from Scotty. The first one being the story of Scotty first meeting Elvis. And if you've been listening to our podcast, as Mike mentioned earlier, our first 2 episodes were about Sun Records and Sam Phillips. And so this segment may feel a bit familiar to you because it was utilized in there in that podcast as well to tell the story of Sun. So we're going to hear that as well as one of my favorite stories from Scotty, and that's him talking about managing Elvis. He was actually Elvis's first manager, which not a lot of people realize. And you can kind of get that warm feeling again from Scotty when he tells that story of he really took him on as a client to help him out. And when the time came for growth and for Elvis to move along and go on to make way more money than Scotty was capable of handling, he let him out of the contract and let him move on to bigger and better managers, which I think is very humbling as well.
Right. Bob Neal was the next guy, and then, as everybody knows, Colonel Tom Parker was the third and final manager for Elvis, which, of course, was instrumental in getting Elvis from Sun Records to RCA, which is another part of this whole transition to Elvis's growth and development in his career.
Do you remember the first time you met Elvis?
Yeah. This is July. It was July 4th, 48 years ago. This past the last 4th of July, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he came over to my house.
Did you know he was coming?
48 years, my Lord.
You're too young for that. Is this a story that Sam set you up that you were going to get together, or?
Well, there's been so many variations of it. The group I was talking about earlier, the Starlight Wranglers. See that when I put that group together, and then I got a little radio show for us. Then I heard about this studio. This guy that had a studio. And you could go in and make your own record, or he was doing some records for some other people, for other labels. And so I went to see, and this was Sam. It was Memphis Recording Service, and the Sun Records was just a side thing. He was trying to land some kind of, get a hit any which way. And he had sense enough to know He was cutting R&B stuff for mainly Chess Records in Chicago, I think. And so anyway, I went to see him, and he said, "Yeah, bring the band in," because he was dabbling around in country music also. And we went in and played several things for him, and he liked it. He said, "You got a good group, good tight." He said, "But do you have any original material?" "Nope." He said, "Well, I really don't see any, percentage in recording other people's material. And so if you get some original material, come back and see me." Well, I went out and wrote 2 songs, and then gave Poindexter, the singer, part of it, and my oldest brother part of it, because he could read music, and he wrote the lead sheet so we could copyright the darn things. I mean, I was really business wise back then.
That's great.
Anxiousness can get you in trouble if you're not careful. But anyway, I got 2 songs. We went back and told Sam, I got a couple of songs, and he said, "Okay, come in, we'll listen again." He liked both songs, and he cut the record.
What was the song?
One song was "My Kind of Carrying On," and gosh, my mind went blank. What is the other side? Can't remember right offhand.
But you were pretty happy with it?
Well, I didn't have sense enough to know what was a hit record if I heard it, what I was looking for is that, okay, I got this little radio show. Now, if I got a record, I could get it played on the radio some and get hopefully more weekend gigs, because all the band had daytime jobs,
You were, a little known fact is, I believe the correct story is you were actually Elvis's first manager even before Bob Neal, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Was that a big paying gig for you?
Oh, boy, look at me now. Now, that actually came about, the first record, when it started getting so much airplay around Memphis. There were 3 or 4 quote-unquote promoters, bookers, managers, whatever you want to be, started calling him and wanted to know if they could book him or they could manage or this and that and the other, and he didn't know what to say to him or anything, and he didn't. And being straight as he was, he didn't think about lying to him. Say, "Yo, no, I've already got somebody." So this was actually Sam's idea. We were talking about it in the studio one day, and Elvis was complaining. He said, "Well, people keep calling me," and he said, "Hey, I'll tell you what to do." Said, "Why don't you sign a contract with Scotty for a year, and so that'll give us a chance to look around and find somebody we all like, to manage or book or whatever." We was thinking about booking more than management. It kind of went together, but and so I went to the lawyer and got just a single. I said, "I want just a single 1-sheet contract," and his mom and daddy had to sign it, of course, because he was underage, and that was what that was about. And then Bob, I don't remember exactly, but he took over before the year was actually completely up anyway.
I think part of the reason why I brought it up is, to me, it's always represented how Elvis trusted you. Did you get that same sense that was an example of his?
He was kind of, he worked kind of like, he was always kind of like a younger brother to me anyway. I guess he kind of felt that way toward me as far as being an older sibling. I don't know. He never said, but we'd argue like anybody else. We all, Bill, DJ, you put 4 guys or 3 guys at the beginning, and 4 in a car 300-400 miles a day, and shoot, one day we get to arguing about something. Everybody who's driving would pull over the side of the road. Everybody pile out of the car and square off, and then maybe one would stay in the car, or the driver maybe or something, and he'd sit there for a minute and he'd say, all right, you SOBs, we got to be there, and so and so and so, better get back in the car. I said, oh yeah, you're right. Get back in the car and go on.
Let down some steam.
Just typical, you know. And
it's always good to hear from Scotty. I feel like he should be in every podcast. Maybe we can put him in more going forward.
Like that idea.
Find ways to just wedge. He can be our fourth co-host. And
great idea.
We'll just edit his interview so he can say whatever we want him to say, so we can put him in every podcast. So moving forward, we're going to talk about some recordings, and I feel like that is kind of what everybody wants to hear about. What came out of all of this? What came out of this big Elvis thing that everybody talks about? And first off, we're going to hear from Boots Randolph.
What's really neat, I think, about this segment, and hats off to Elizabeth for putting this together, is, and Michael alluded to it, this, of course, is the heart of Elvis's career. But our angle with these interviews from the NAMM Oral History Program is talking about the instruments and the people behind that scene, both in the studio and live performances, that helped Elvis achieve that sound that he was looking for. And they did it in a number of ways and with a number of different instruments. And so it's kind of neat. We've been talking about a bass and drums and guitar, and now we get to hear from a saxophone hero of mine, Boots Randolph.
And he's going to be talking about the hit Reconsider Baby, which, Dan, pop quiz, was released in what year?
Oh, my gosh.
Oh man, I feel
1961 was the first time that they recorded it, but it actually wasn't released until later, so it might be a trick question.
Ooh. Man, I thought we had him.
So close.
And interestingly enough, there's a great story behind that.
Oh, boy. Okay, I got to lean back.
Done?
Hold on.
What have you done?
Boy.
So Elvis did a lot of charity work, most of which went unnoticed for a long time. The state of Hawaii, that had just become a state, I believe in the late 1950s. That's a good trivia question for you. Was it 1959? That's what I want to say. Anyway, it became a state,
I could guess.
And the state was raising money to create a memorial for the SS Arizona that was attacked and sunk during the early days of World War II. And so Elvis went and performed to help raise money, and Boots Randolph was there along with Scotty and the rest of the gang, and it was a very moving experience, according to Boots. He didn't tell us on camera, but later recalled the story of just shaking there, knowing what had happened in that very site, and to think that they were going to make a lasting impression, to have this memorial that people could go to for the future. And, of course, that memorial is still very much a part of the landscape there at Pearl Harbor. So really interesting stuff happening. But this song was a blues song, which Elvis, of course, was very influenced by the blues, but didn't record a whole lot of blues records. A few, of course, but this is pretty much a quintessential blues recording, Reconsider Baby. And so we get to hear from the sax man himself, Boots Randolph.
Well, you sort of ran right over Reconsider Baby, and I'd like to go back to it for a minute, because that's, I really think, in my opinion, one of the greatest Elvis recordings, and it has a lot to do with the fact that he really focused on the blues, and that had a lot to do with your solo, I think.
Elvis was really a blues man. He came out of that Delta stuff down there, and he was a real fan of all the blues, and the gospel stuff was pretty all put together, And he says, and this is late now, it must be 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning when we're recording, and he says, go get your sax, and I want to do a blues thing and let you play a little bit on it. And we're all sitting, we're pretty well rocked out by this time, but I went and got the horn, and he starts playing it, and I think it might have been the first or second take that he did, and I had waited so long to play that I was keyed up, man. I mean, I'm wired by now, And I got that horn, and I don't know what kind of solo it was, but I listened to it not too long ago. I listened to it again. It's a pretty good solo.
It's great.
But he liked it. He really liked it, and I was really proud because it's the only time that anybody ever played a sax solo.
Is there more than one version of that? It seems to me there's a longer version.
He did it at Pearl Harbor. We did a live concert over there, and I heard a version of it came from that same show. And I also played a solo on that particular thing. But that's the only one I know of. It could be another one.
Did you perform live with him at any other time besides that SS Arizona fundraising?
We did a couple of shows. We did one in Memphis. I think we did one in Shreveport. I don't remember if we did one here in Nashville. We did about 4 or 5, and that was it. He didn't do a lot of concerts back in those days. Those were right after he got out of the service. And then he did the Blue Hawaii's, and we did the soundtrack here in Hollywood. And then we went on over to Hawaii and did the concert for raising money for the Arizona. Yeah.
I'd love to get your thoughts about what it was like being in the studio, particularly in those the soundtrack years, because even though we sort of hear a lot of bad things about how horrible the plots were in those movies, there were some great musicians on those recordings. And tell me a little bit about how that worked out.
You know, movie music is different than a lot of other different. They're writing music for a scene. And a lot of times the scenes are built around a tune or vice versa. The musicians they had were all fabulous players. I mean, I remember out in Hollywood when we did some soundtracks, we had Barney Castle playing guitar, Hal Blaine on drums, and all of our guys from Nashville and people like that. And it was really the best of. And I think probably, you know, some of them were less than great songs, let me put it like that. I remember the publishers would be around, and they were sort of helping to feed this stuff into Elvis. And for the soundtracks, I remember we did one, Hal Wallace directed, I can't remember what the movie was. But there was a lot of choreography in it. And the guy said, well, I want you to play sax, but this scene is going to be, he's going to be in a boat out in the middle of a lake, and I can't figure that the saxophone player's going to be standing out there playing sax or something to that effect. I said, well, he said, just play kind of background. He said, don't get too wild and woolly. And that sort of thing went along. We tried to fit into whatever it called for, the scene or the occasion. And Elvis was fun to work with because he was up, and he had a lot of energy. He was shy. He was naive quite a bit, and we discussed different things like having fun, you know, and that's what that whole industry was about during those days was let's have a good time here, and it'll show, and it'll be part of life, you know, and it did. So I think cutting soundtracks is a little different than just regular out recording. I think a little bit maybe. Still the same process, but of course back in those days they just did everything analog. There was no digital, you know.
So that was Boots Randolph, who, as Dan mentioned prior to the clip, played the sax with Elvis. Possibly Dan's favorite sax player, maybe only rivaled by
Jim Horn. That's a whole other story.
If you ever cross paths with Dan from NAMM, please ask him to tell you the Jim Horn story. And then if Mike and I are with him, watch our faces when you ask him.
Just watch
to
our
tell
eyes.
You. Yeah,
they'll be rolling.
They'll disappear. I'll see the back of my head. And
Only
then
because you've heard it a million
back.
times, not because it's a charming and wonderful story.
Jim Horn is fantastic, and it was such a pleasure to meet him. Let's just put that out there. But if I have to hear Dan tell that story one more time, I might just scream. So,
for the record, you brought it up today.
Because how could I not? I mean, look at that segue. So next, moving on, getting us back on track, we're going to hear from one of our, our little favorites here in the Resource Center.
Yeah, I feel like he's famous here.
And at the time of the recording, he recently had a birthday. So,
yes,
a little shout out to him.
Norbert Putnam, the great bass player who had been on tons of records in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, as a part of that great rhythm section, got to Elvis in the early 1970s and recorded, I think, over 10 full albums with Elvis, including those that were recorded at the in the Jungle Room in Graceland. Norbert is a wonderful guy and a great storyteller. And maybe this is a good opportunity to plug the fact that he has a book out that you might find very entertaining, as I did. He's also opened up his home and his contacts for the oral history program, and we've been able to interview several people, dozens actually, of musicians and studio guys, engineers, songwriters that Norbert knows and is friends with, because he cares so much about our collection and sees the importance of documenting these stories. So we're very, very pleased to be friends with him, and of course he's got a million stories to tell. So let's hear one of them.
We were booked 6 to 9, 10 to 1 a.m., Monday through Friday with Elvis Presley. And I found out the first night that even though we were there at 6 o'clock, the king always walks through the door at 8. And then it's an embracing time of storytelling and camaraderie until 10 o'clock. And I've often thought about this later. Presley felt he needed to spend a couple hours to relax everybody. He was the most common guy in the world, okay? But when he came through the door, he had a cape on, and he was carrying a walking cane with a silver lion's head with ruby eyes. And he pitches that, and he's King Leopold of King Ludwig of Bavaria, right? And then he says, "Come and give me a hug, everybody." And they're all, and it's together. I have to tell you what has happened to Elvis Presley. He would actually talk about himself in the third person. So he clowned around for about 10 o'clock, till 10, and Felton would come out. Now, Felton would come out, "Elvis, oh, look, now it's 10 o'clock. You know, the guys have already got one session with an hour overtime, and yeah, we made an hour. Haven't had a note. I love this. See? And we really need to get something done. You know, we're going to try to get, the first week I worked with him, we do 2 or 3 different kinds of records. I think we might have begun a Christmas record and a gospel record and a classic country record, the picture of him as a little kid. We do all of that in 5 nights. Okay. So about 10 o'clock, I always say, "Okay, Felton, what do you want to start with first?" And he'd say, "Well, why don't we do Silver Bells? We're going to do a Christmas song. You guys know Silver Bells? Well, might play. You got a demo of it just to refresh." So they play Silver Bells, jingling, it's Christmas time. And I was just singing along, and we were writing out all the numbers. And, okay, let's run it down once. So we run it down. Engineers got one shot, okay? We run it down, and Elvis hand me my mic, and it was for all of you equipment guys, it was an Electro Voice RE15 wrapped in foam, which is probably the same mic he used in Vegas. You can't pop it. Has great rejection, very narrow pattern. And so, and he's standing in front of the bass and drums, and he's got a long chord. Well, we knock out the first night. He gets it in 2 or 3 takes. We play it flawlessly, right? Why would we make a mistake? We got a road map. All I have to do is glance at my little number chart. I know exactly where it's going. And this was the great thing about being a Nashville studio guy. This was our secret weapon. They couldn't do this in New York and L.A. They needed an arranger to write out all the bars and letter. It's a C minor 7. We put 1 minus for C minor, okay? 1 plus is 1 augmented, okay? And what was the triangle? We had all these things. So anyway, that first night we do 7 sides and it's 3 a.m. We start at 10. In the week we did 35 sides, and the king was loving it. See, he wanted a band. He wanted to be like a jam. Let's start singing. You start playing. You guys record it. We'll see how much energy we can put into it. And he was over the top with energy. I'd never ever recorded with anyone who was as willing to go over the top. It was like an athletic event. It was like You guys ready? We're going to get this. All right, one take. We're going to kill this thing. You ready to go? You ready, Fulton? Turn on the light. I mean, he was like that. You know, he was like a fullback. He's about to take it in from the 3-yard line over the top. You know.
So let's jump back to a familiar name that we just heard from in the previous segment, James Burton. And last we heard from him, he was just talking about the Louisiana Hayride and meeting Elvis for the first time. Now we're going to hear him talk about his favorite recordings with Elvis.
Now, I know a couple of your favorite of the Ricky Nelson recordings, but do you have a couple of favorite things that you did with Elvis?
Yeah, we did a lot of great live stuff. I played on a lot of also recordings, and we did Moody Blue, all those in the studio, Burning Love, all those. And we did a lot of live things like Suspicious Minds. You know, he did an album in '68 when he did the comeback special. And that's when he recorded In the Ghetto and Suspicious Minds in the studio in Memphis. And but for some reason, we started playing it live, and which was faster than the record, the recording, and he liked it better. For the live recording, and that seemed to be the one that they played most. And I liked all the songs we did. I mean, everything was great. The ballads, all the country stuff, all the rock and roll stuff, a lot of his old stuff, Mystery Train, and That's All Right, Little Mama, and he just, all that stuff. I mean, it was great. We just had the feel for it. It was good. He loved it.
Well, speaking of favorite recordings, we also have a great segment of DJ Fontana talking about one of the early songs that really put Elvis on the map, his first recording with RCA in 1956, which was Heartbreak Hotel.
Yeah, and in this clip, we're also DJ talks about that, but he also kind of jumps around and talks about one of the other kind of iconic things that gets associated with Elvis, and that's his passion for cars, specifically Cadillacs. And so you hear DJ mention in there the story of going on tour in their cars, driving themselves around as opposed to what tours look like today, and Elvis' love for Cadillacs, which is kind of a unique perspective because you don't really hear that from these guys.
The first one we did here in town was Heartbreak Hotel, and that was $1 million seller. I don't know how it went that fast, but it did. He was new on the label, which is hard to sell 1 million records, if you're new. And after that, it was million after million after million, and then Don't Be Cruel and Hound Dog was 8 million, So.
All the first year.
Yeah, so you never know who's going to hit and who not. You hope you luck out and get with a guy that's going to be good.
Well, there was a lot of struggle at the very beginning, as you mentioned. Some of those early concerts, he kind of bombed a little bit, and you traveled with him in an old car, right?
Yeah, well, it started out, Scotty had a 53 Chevrolet, and it wasn't his car at all. He didn't have any money. Elvis didn't have any money. Bill didn't have a job. Nobody was working. Scotty's wife was working. She was working at Sears down there, so she had a car. They let her have credit, see. The rest of them, no. So they used her car for a long time until it just fell all apart. And then he was making a little money, so he bought a 53 or 54 Cadillac Stretch. And that's how it really started. He loved Cadillacs anyhow, so. And he had at one time he had 5 or 6 sitting in front of his house after he bought Graceland, but none of them would run. He'd just leave them there and they'd dry rot, tires and everything. Now the car we took, as soon as we get to Memphis, Scotty would take it right to the shop, get it fixed. Whatever's wrong, fix it. Go to California, put it in the shop, and get it fixed. But he had not a car in his lot that would run, except that one. He didn't worry about cars. We knew we had to get a car to run from his house to the West Coast, or we'd walk. So we took care of that car. we didn't do it at RCA there, that on the corner up there, RCAB. We cut that at around the corner there. They had it was an old church, and they had a little room made, for a studio. RCA did, and there was no echo at all in that, and no echo places or nothing like that. So what they did to get that, it was trying to get that same sound of Sun, which they never find. They never did get it. Sound was too smart for them, And what they did, the engineers said, well, we got to get this echo going. So they run some mics down a hallway and picked up and we couldn't walk down the hallway because of footsteps, And that's how they got the echo on that first Heartbreak Hotel.
And then things just happened for you guys, these television appearances.
Well, that's when it really got busy. We went to New York, we did a couple of shows. We did 6 Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey shows right off, and that kind of got the ball rolling. And then we did Sullivan, all those other guys, And like I said, he was a handsome dude anyhow, and he got the girls on his side, so that's all we needed,
That probably didn't hurt you either, did it?
Oh, not much. Well, we're not going to go into that, are we?
What was did you actually at one point move to Memphis?
Never did. I never moved to Memphis. To tell you the truth, I never did like Memphis. I couldn't really find my way around in that town. I don't know why. I moved from there to here, Nashville. I liked Nashville, but I never couldn't get used to Memphis at all. It may be a nice town, I don't know. But I still go down there all the time, and I still get lost. And that's only been 40 years,
Next up, we're going to hear back from the dynamic duo that we heard from in the previous segment, Chip Young and Fred Foster. We're going to hear 3 back-to-back clips. The first one being about what it was like working as a session player and working with Elvis. Their sessions with Elvis, as well as music publishing, and the song "Burning Love."
Now, I wonder, since you were a session player for such a long time, was it ever aggravating to do different takes? If it took 5 or 6 takes to get the song, did that bother you at all?
No, not really. No, just
do your job.
Just keep on going on. Yeah.
Some of those things took quite a lot of takes.
Yeah, some of them. Now, we didn't do very many takes with Elvis.
Really?
No, he liked to sing it one time and go on to the next song.
Him and Sinatra.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
What tunes did you do with Elvis?
Oh, I did just about everything he made from '65 till he died. Yeah. I didn't do the things they cut down in Memphis. Well, I mean, the things they did at American.
I know, didn't
I
you?
was a thumb picker like Jerry Reed, and I got to where I was playing thumb pick on a lot of stuff. I did on Vaughn Gosden. I can tell by the way you dance, you're gonna love me tonight. That's me playing the thumb pick.
Oh, okay.
On that.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, last year the National Thumb Picker Hall of Fame up in Central City, Kentucky, that's where Merle Travis was born and raised, inducted me into the Hall of Fame up there.
How neat.
Yeah, it really was very neat.
So now when you look back at some of the sessions you did with Elvis, are you heard on, is there any particular ones you like your role in that you can hear?
Yeah, but I can't tell you any of them right now.
It's been a while back.
Yeah.
Well, you were on Burning Love, I think.
Yeah. In fact, I mixed Burning Love.
You did?
Yeah, I mixed that whole album.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Moody Blue I mixed, and the Memphis Boulevard album I mixed out in Murfreesboro.
Really? What was that like, the mixing? aspect.
He was going to come out there. He flew into Simona that night in the Lisa Marie, and he called Felton Jarvis and said, "How's it going?" And said, "Oh, Chip's got it under control, man. It sounds great." He said, "Well, if it sounds good," he said, "I'm going to go back to Memphis then." He didn't want to come out there anyway.
Let to go home.
He didn't. Once he sung it, that he was through with it, you know.
You know, one thing about Elvis I'm curious about, I wonder if you had any experience with, every once in a while you see a picture of him playing a guitar or up behind the drums or another instrument. Was he pretty musical besides singing?
Well, you know, he played on, they tried to cut One Night With You, and they called a break. Scotty and DJ and several other people went outside the studio. Elvis picked up the guitar and started playing do-da-do-dong, ching-chong, ching-chong, do-da-do-dong. And somebody, producer said, "Hey, that sounds great, let's cut that." Do-da-do, and that's the way it was. And he played guitar on it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
He played guitar on the real early stuff at Sun, too.
Yeah. Played rhythm guitar.
Yeah,
then.
right. He could play a little piano, too.
Very
interesting. And
I love gospel music.
Sam Phillips always told Scotty, said, "Scotty, don't play any of that Chet Atkins stuff or that stuff like." He said, "If you weren't so cheap and you'd hire another guitar player, I wouldn't have to play that. Try to fill up all the holes." Scotty got all over Sam all the time.
Well, what's interesting is, you know, just how powerful Scotty's riffs are behind Elvis.
Boy.
Oh, unbelievable to me.
They really were. I think if it hadn't have been for Scotty, there would never have been an Elvis.
Mm-hmm.
You may be right.
You know, I just don't think it would have ever happened.
Not as big
Scotty
as
had
it
so
did.
much fire in that guitar that those records just were powerful.
Oh, they just jump alive.
Yeah.
And you know, and nothing against Elvis, but there was a couple of times on a couple of those records where when you got to that break where Scotty does his little solo thing, it seems to bring it back to life.
Yes.
I'm totally with you on that. And you know, what's interesting to me is I picked up some of those Sun records where he was playing country music before he met Elvis. You know, he did a couple of those, and he had that. You could tell it was Scotty.
Every bit of it.
All the way through. I love that.
Scotty's one of my dearest friends. I go see him. He's 85 years old now.
Is that right?
Just turned 85, yeah. He doesn't play anymore, but...
Does he still live up on Blueberry Hill?
Yeah.
Okay, I got to see him up there once.
Yeah, oh man, he's just the sweetest guy.
That's the truth.
I told him I was going to come up this week, but I hadn't felt worth the flip, so I hadn't been anywhere.
With some great stuff you guys have done.
Boy.
Some great stuff.
Scotty's the one that got me on the Elvis sessions.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he told Elvis, said, "This is a kid in town that we got to start using." And that was me. Oh, man, it was so good.
Did you play on those soundtracks during that time, too?
Yeah, on the...
okay.
Oh, 'cause some of them were so bad. I hate to say that, but they were.
No gut telling what would have happened to Elvis's career.
Yeah.
And he'd been willing to cut any outside song that came along that was great.
Yeah.
Even on Burning Love, I got a call from Freddie Beanstalk. We're considering recording Burning Love with Elvis, so we'll need to get half the publishing. I said, "No, thank you." He said, "What do you mean, no, thank you? It's an Elvis." I said, "I don't care who it is. I don't have to give up any publishing. I don't need the money. Forget about it." And he said, "Well, now, you know, we probably won't do it." I said, "I don't care. If the song is there, somebody will find it. Don't worry about it."
Yeah.
And then I told Beckham, we're not going to do this. And he said, then they're not going to cut it. I said, they've already cut it. And he said, how do you know? I said, Beanstalk would not have called me had they not already.
That's exactly right.
I said, smart and he said, no, you're wrong. I said, well, just said right there. I got on the phone in his office and called Felton. I said, Felton, have you done Burning Love with Elvis? He said, yeah, and it's fantastic. It's the next single. I said, well, Freddie Beanstalk's trying to get half the publishing. He said, screw him. You don't have to give it up. It's going to be the next single.
Mm-hmm.
And there you are.
And you kept it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know, he cut 3 of Jerry Reed's songs. And then Beanstalk called him and said, hey, Jerry, we're thinking about cutting Alabama Wild Man and 2 other songs.
Guitar
and
Man.
Jerry said, yeah, Guitar Man. Jerry said, great, man, I wish you would. That'd be great. He said, but we got to have, you know, Elvis never cut anything without getting publishing on it. He said, well, you can't do that with mine. Of course, we'd already cut them, you know. Jerry just backed him in the corner, you know, and said, I'm not giving publishing up.
It's kind of an interesting aspect of the music publishing where they sort of would strong-arm some folks into giving up the publishing, huh?
Yeah.
And the idea is that they would, pay up front an amount of money for the publishing, and then they would then keep all the royalties? Is that basically how that works?
Oh, they wouldn't pay up front.
No.
Oh, no.
No.
Well, how would they get the publishing? Like, for example, when Freddie called you about Burning Love.
Well, he wanted me to sign half the publishing to him.
Oh, just sign it off.
Yeah, and forget it.
Yeah, what would be the purpose of that?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Huh.
Yeah, they are.
I think
you got to be careful.
Yeah, they were on the shady side of the tree.
Copyrights are annuities in my mind. A copyright's an annuity.
Right.
And songs are like children to me in a way. I would no more cut up one of my kids.
You know, they're
not going to cut a song in half to give some.
They'd come in the studio with a set list of songs that they already had cleared to get publishing on.
Oh.
And a lot of times I'd speak up and say, hey, let's cut so-and-so and so-and-so. Boy, they would go into a rage.
They didn't have those covers.
They didn't have publishing. They hated me because I was looking for things, you know, always that felt good and I knew would make that Elvis would enjoy doing, you know.
Did he ever do any of those, or they always shut him down?
Yeah. We did Too Much Monkey Business and a lot of those things.
It's a great tune.
Yeah, they didn't like it. No. They didn't like it when I made a suggestion. Let's do this and do that. Oh man.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How much longer do you think?
Oh, this is way more than I ever expected. I really appreciate your time.
I really need to get back to the house. I've got a meeting out there.
Well, I am so grateful. I hope I can communicate that to you guys. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah, we enjoyed it.
And we're going to round out this segment on recordings with hearing from Scotty Moore once again. And he worked with Elvis on You're So Square, Baby I Don't Care. So we're going to hear him tell the story of that song and working with Elvis.
You also tell a good story of You're So Square, Baby I Don't Care. Last year, when I met you, I said, was it Billy?
On Bill, yeah.
Did Billy play the bass on it? Tell me that.
No, Elvis played bass on it. We were running the song, and Bill hadn't been playing electric bass very long. He finally switched to electric bass just for traveling. I mean, the big bass just wasn't feasible carrying around all the time. And even though he would play guitar, he just and we were playing that thing, and Elvis heard this one thing on. I was already playing it on guitar. The don 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 don, and he wanted the bass to do the same thing, and Bill just couldn't get the feeling thing right the way he wanted it, and he just threw the thing down in the floor and went outside and got him a cup of coffee or something, and Elvis picked the bass up and just played it, you know, just like he'd been playing it all his life. He never played electric bass, but there again, that comes back to that rhythm. He had great rhythm. He heard something, and he just was easy for him. He heard it in his head, and he played right along with me. And that's probably, if I'm not mistaken, probably the first time that he ever overdubbed. And that was still just tape to tape because we didn't have tracks yet. And we cut that, and then he sang it.
Thanks for listening to part 1 of our podcast all about the King. Be sure to check back in 2 weeks for the conclusion, where we'll hear more from those who worked closely with Elvis.